Hey, I'm Jeff from the Thoughtful Real Estate Entrepreneur. I love seller financing nerd. Can't stop talking about it. And today I want to talk with you for a second about how to find seller financing leads. Because as I'm out in the world talking to real estate investors and groups and networking and all that kind of stuff, this is a thing I hear people talk about all the time that they just feel frustrated with, which is like, where do I find this? Man, it seems like finding a needle in a haystack. It's extremely rare, or they have other misconceptions. And so today I want to talk with you about how to find seller financing leads. Take a second. If you wouldn't mind, subscribe to our channel, like this video, and that will help you stay up with lots of cool future stuff we've got coming up here. Much more content on relationship-based negotiation, seller financing, how those things go together, and other thoughtful, non-mainstream perspectives on building a rental portfolio and doing thoughtful real estate entrepreneurship. So here's the first thing that I want to sort of make clear. Seller financing is very much about the person more than the property, right? It is called seller financing. It's not property financing by sellers. It's seller financing. And so what does this mean? Seller financing it's about the person, the seller's situation and what they're trying to accomplish, and how providing the financing might help them get more of what they want and try to get where they're trying to go even better. Now, that means if it's about the person more than the property, we have to be shopping for a person, not shopping for a property. So, like, number one, this is the thing where people will kind of get a little bit screwed up, is that by default, what we're taught to do, of course, and obviously, is we go shopping for properties and we think about our financing, and then we find the property we like, and then I have to kind of go through the person to get the property that I want. But this is a totally different thing. We're looking for a person and then we're seeing what they own, rather than looking for a property and then seeing who owns it. That leads us to another important point here, which is that if you are going to be shopping for a person and ultimately you're going to have some kind of communication with them, it sort of starts to ask this question of, well, are these going to be listed properties, or are these going to be not listed properties? And the answer is it's going to be not listed properties. Now, is it possible to find a seller financing deal on the MLS? Sure, it's absolutely possible. I mean, there's even some that are listed as being that, but those are not the same types of situations. The terms and everything about that's going to be different. Just the context, or what I call negotiation dynamic, is going to be totally different when you never get to actually meet the seller who you're negotiating with, because there's intermediaries called realtors who are standing between you guys. And so when it comes to seller financing, though, the conversation is going to go a lot better. You're going to result in much better terms if you can get some FaceTime and some direct contact and communication with that seller. So again, can you try to find seller finance properties on the MLS? Yes, but it's going to be a different brand of seller financing that's not overall going to be as good for you. I'm quite certain we can say that confidently as a generalization. It's not going to be as good of a scenario for you as the buyer, as what you can accomplish if you're negotiating with somebody face to face. So I want you to think about two different categories of seller financing sellers. Okay. Here's the one, column A, let's call it, that you probably have thought of before, that most people probably have thought of before. Column A is somebody who's got a property, who wants to sell it, but it's not going that well, right? It's hard to sell their property. Maybe the property's got some issues. Maybe it's not financeable for repair reasons or whatever. Maybe the market's not really that good. Maybe there would be willing buyers, but freaking interest rates are super high. And so that's kind of crushing their ability to sell the property. So they've got this property that they want to sell, but it's kind of jammed up. It's like a machine that is rusty and is like not working very well. So what do? They come in with the idea of seller financing, and it's like spraying WD-40 all over their jammed up thing. And they're like, oh, this is going to basically lubricate my ability to sell my property. So that's kind of column A. And I think what you get with that is you end up with people who are willing to do seller financing, but it's not what they'd prefer, right? And when you get somebody who's just willing to do it, but that's not really what they want to do, What does that do to your terms? It means that your terms are not going to be nearly as good. It's probably going to be a much shorter term. It's probably going to be a higher interest rate because they want to protect themselves. I wish they had another option, but this is all they got. It might be like larger down payment because they're thinking, I really need to protect myself because I don't really want to be doing this, but I kind of feel like I have to. It's part of the spraying the WD-40 all over their deal just to get it sold. And so I think these days you hear a lot of people talking about creative financing, which can mean a lot of different things. And I would say that's mostly column A. Column A is fine, but that's not where I would encourage you to spend your time. It's not where I've spent my time. It's not what I coach my clients on spending their time. So let's talk about column B. Column B is filled with sellers who have a certain situation such that if they sold their property, it creates new problems for them. And the seller financing is actually in a great way to solve the new problems that come up with them selling their property. So these people, while they might not realize it like the second you meet them, these people actually are so well suited by seller financing that as you unpack the conversation with them, they actually start to realize that they're not willing to do seller financing. They want to do seller financing because this is the thing that's going to solve the new problems that are created by the sale of their property. So that brings us to the meat and potatoes of what we need to be talking about, which is how do we go and shop for a person? Like, what do we do? And I want to give you some ideas here so that you kind of understand the thought process and the framework for how you might go about that. So again, we're shopping for a person, not a property specifically. Ultimately, obviously, it is a property we will buy, not a person we will buy, but it's a person who we're shopping with for to have the right kind of conversation about buying that property. So step number one, know the attributes of a great seller financing candidate, right? So these are the attributes of a person, not the attributes of a property. What are the attributes of a person who is a great seller financing candidate? Well, number one, I would say of the few we'll discuss, to me, this is probably the biggest driver that I've experienced, the thing that has unlocked the most of the deals for me, is that person, when they sell their property, one of the new problems that's created is the capital gains tax that they would have to pay upon the sale of the property. So who has capital gains tax problems? It's not owner occupants for the most part. It's absentee owners, people who own rental properties, people who own investment properties. Who owns a rental property that has the biggest tax problem? Well, not somebody who bought it like last Tuesday, somebody who's owned it for a while. So number one attribute is they would have capital gains tax problems because they're an absentee owner over a long period of time. Now, can these people just defer capital gains with a 1031 exchange? Yeah, absolutely they could. And most people know that. Most of the sellers know that. But not everybody is at a point in their life where they go, oh, I can't wait to just trade this responsibility for another one. Some people are thinking, gosh, this rental thing has been awesome to me. It's done great things for our wealth. I'm kind of ready to be done. And the seller financing plan can allow them to achieve a lot of the same outcomes or similar comparable outcomes of capital gains deferral, not exactly the same, but very similar overall effectively, but without needing to do a 1031 exchange. So that's huge attribute number one is capital gains tax obligation should they sell. Here's another attribute. These sellers tend to like to have income. That's probably why they had a rental property in the first place. Now, if they sell the rental property, sometimes then they're thinking to themselves, well, now I need to go find a way to replace the income. I like income. I don't want just like a stack of cash in my checking account that every week I'm doing some calculation to figure out if I'm rationing it quickly or rationing it at the right pace. People don't necessarily want to do that. So the second attribute is we're looking for people who have liked the income and actually feel hesitant to sell the property because the income would go away. Again, selling the property creates new problems for them. One of those problems is I need to replace the income somehow. And if we connect that with problem number one, they might be saying, I need to replace the income somehow, and I'm not super excited about doing that by buying another rental property. And a third attribute is somebody who doesn't necessarily have a specific purpose and need a ton of cash. And so these are people, again, who are kind of usually later in their life. Now, maybe you watching this video, maybe I can't relate all that well to, like, boy, if I got a couple $100,000, I just don't know what I would do with it. But there are absolutely people who are at a point in their life, especially after they've owned a rental property for a long time, it's paid off, they've got income, they wouldn't know what to do with it. They don't have a purpose for it. And it kind of becomes a little bit of like a question mark or a burden or a project. They're like, gosh, what am I going to do? That sounds like it's going to take some work for me to figure out something responsible to do with that cash. So those are the attributes we're looking for in a person who's a good candidate for seller financing. So our second step then is we need to reach out to these people to start a conversation. And so there's lots of different ways to reach out to people, right? I mean, there's no shortage of YouTube videos, I'm sure, right here that would talk to you about, lead generation and like how to reach out and all these different ways. But I would say the simplest way is the best. The simplest way that makes the person receiving the message feel safe, feel comfortable giving you contact back, that doesn't one of the things that happens a lot in real estate investor marketing, whether intentionally or not, is it creates this dynamic that makes the seller feel like, I'm getting this marketing message because the person who sent it to me sees me as a wounded gazelle and they're the lion, and they see it an easy opportunity to pounce on something and get dinner. We don't want to make that feeling happen for probably obvious reasons when I explain it like that. So let's reach out to people in a nice, easy, thoughtful kind of way. I like to simply get a list of these people by querying public records databases. Who has owned a rental property for a long time in the area I want to own in, right? Oh, I love this neighborhood. I love duplexes. Let's look for the duplexes that are owned by people who don't live there and have owned them for 10 or more years. That's just pretty much as simple as that. I send them a nice, simple, personal, low pressure, not scary at all type of letter to introduce myself, which leads us to the third step, which is then we need to establish trust and build some rapport. Trust starts with just comfort, right? Again, if they're like, there's not a lot of trust that comes from feeling like you're the gazelle who's about to get pounced on. So trust comes from just making them feel like they are safe giving you a call back. I always do this with my hands. I like to create what I call peer positioning. Let's have them feel like we are just like them. Oh, you're a local mom and pop landlord? Cool. I'm a local mom and pop landlord as well. We start to establish that trust. And when they call us, we're establishing rapport and not cutting to the chase too quickly. We're just having a normal conversation between two normal people. And in some ways, what I'm talking about here is make this feel less businessy, because this isn't, while it is a business and it might be a business to them, and it's probably a business to you, let's have this be a real personal conversation between two people and not have it feel so corporate or process oriented or rigid. It's a conversation between two people. And then lastly, as you're having this conversation, you have reached out to these people because you believe there's a high likelihood they embody the attributes that we just discussed, right? The capital gains deferral or capital gains obligation, probably a desire to refer, probably a desire to have income, probably not a huge cash need, all of those things. So as you have the conversation, you need to kind of confirm those things. I mean, you know that they're absentee owners. That's just a fact before you reached out to them. You know that if they were to sell this property, there would be a capital gains situation. That too is just a fact based on, public information, but we need to uncover how they feel about those things. It's possible you might meet a seller who just doesn't care about paying the tax, and that just isn't an issue for them. Well, I don't think that's the common thing, but it's certainly possible. So in our conversation, we need to uncover, how do they actually feel about these? How do they feel about these aspects of their situation? Because it's not going to be good if we go prescribing something. Here's how you should sell me your property. It's called seller financing. If we're prescribing that for a condition they don't think they have, if they don't care about deferring capital gains and paying the bill, if they don't really care about income, if they don't care about the project that comes from a lump sum of money, well, then our prescription is going to land on deaf ears and make us look kind of silly in the process, because we're not prescribing something that actually meets their needs. So this is the framework for how we find seller financing leads. Is we're shopping for a person. We're understanding that the best seller financing leads are actually not just people who are trying to spray WD-40 all over their, their jammed up attempt to sell a property, and they're sort of reluctantly willing to provide us some crappy terms as a way to get rid of the property. That really we're looking for a person who's in a specific situation. They're not distressed whatsoever. They've owned a property for a long time. It's been good to them. Selling the property is something they want to do, but it creates a whole new host of problems. And that host of problems can be solved with a thoughtful seller financing proposal. So if you want to know more about this whole process, and this is what we talk about and teach on all the time in the Thoughtful Real Estate Entrepreneur community in our program called the Deals Workshop. This is a complete sort of soup to nuts, step-by-step process from leading people from buying or from initiating some leads all the way to starting to talk to those people, negotiating, deal strategizing, deal structuring, deal analysis, making the right proposal, incremental negotiation that comes from getting their feedback, and all of that stuff. You can go to thedealsworkshop.com. We'd love to have you in our Facebook group for thoughtful real estate entrepreneurs as well. You can just go to group.thoughtfulre.com in a browser, and it'll take you right to that page in Facebook. Thank you for watching. I hope to see you in the next video.